Now, Keith, we're going to close things out with some WNBA basketball. And WNBA used to be a sensitive subject for me because we had our Monarchs here in Sacramento. They won the 2005 championship, and 4 years later, they had disbanded. A player that had played against the Sacramento Monarchs quite often throughout her career is none other than Sue Bird, a basketball Hall of Famer who received a statue from the Seattle Storm this past weekend. Very well deserved. And the reason why this is a topic worth talking about is that this is the first statue ever given to a WNBA player. It makes sense given the fact that Seattle doesn't have an NBA team, that they would be the first to give a player a statue. But it also, like, what took them so long? That's the thing that I'm wondering. I know Asia Wilson has her statue at University of South Carolina, but for this to be the first WNBA player to get a statue kind of surprised me when I saw this news, but definitely well-deserved for Sue Bird. Keith, just what was your reaction when you saw Sue get her statue unveiled, but also the fact that she's the first WNBA player to ever have a statue dedicated to her?
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up the concept that Seattle lost their NBA team. I would make the argument for a lot of those people in Seattle that Sue Bird really carried basketball in that city for the last 10, 12 years. And if you go off just like the stats, is arguably one of the most consistent players in WNBA history. Never really had a down year, was never really injured. And so she was always reliable to be out on the floor for her teammates, for the Seattle Storm. I think what you're going to see in the WNBA now, more specifically, is now the league is getting a lot more notoriety, a lot more recognizable people that are coming to the games just by whether it's Caitlin Clark or in general the draft classes the last couple of years, Haley Van Lith, obviously Paige, and we still got Juju Watkins coming down the pipe. You're going to get a lot more faces that continue to watch the league, and the league's going to grow exponentially. I was working the other night, and the Lynx and the Liberty had a great game on Saturday, right? And so the league itself is going to continue to grow and expand. So it's only right, and you bring up the concept, what took it so long? I would bring up the concept that now that the league's getting more notoriety, hopefully a lot more of these franchises, pay homage to the people that came and paved the way for the league. Because the one thing that a lot of people talk about with the WNBA is the knock that everyone talks about with Caitlin Clark is, well, Caitlin Clark and this and that, and we're forgetting about the greats. I hope that this statue would pave the way for Diana Taurasi to get a statue in Phoenix. Just in general, Lisa Leslie with the Sparks. Just, open up the floodgates to give the, so to speak, OGs of the league their time in the sun. Dawn Staley. I mean, the possibilities are endless, but I would say if there was going to be the first one to get a statue, Sue Bird, obviously, you couldn't go wrong picking a player of that caliber. But hopefully the league's expansion paves the way for the people who were there when these girls were not making the most money and did not have the best traveling accommodations, who really were like the four fathers or four women, so four mothers, so to speak, get their time in the sun more often.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And another name that I would throw in there, just recently got her jersey retired, Candace Parker. She would be another great player to get a statue. Then you even think back to when the WNBA started with Cheryl Swoops and Tina Thompson, Cynthia Cooper. And so there's so many great players that laid the foundation for Caitlin Clark to go out there and do what she has been doing. And so I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Keith, because Sue Bird definitely is very deserving of it. And I'm glad to see her get that statue. And a couple things I wanted to get to real quickly before we got out of here is, number one, I wanted to tell a quick story about the first time that I visited Washington, because back in 2021, while COVID restrictions everywhere, my friend Matthew Pearson and I, we decided to go on a trip to Seattle because we wanted to be able to see Sue Bird play before she retired and see her play in person. And it was uncertain going into the 2021 season if she was going to retire or not. We went and saw her play at Angels of the Wind Arena in Everett, Washington, because Climate Pledge was being restored for the Seattle Kraken to come and play there. And so we got to go see Sue play in Everett in this tiny little arena. I got to see them play against my favorite team, the Liberty. It was pretty exciting. But then Sue returned for another season. So then we made another trip out of it, and we came out the next year, and I got to see Climate Pledge Arena, got to see Sue play there. And it was just really awesome. And she's arguably the greatest point guard of all time. And so I wanted to go see her play in person. I'm glad I got to go see her play in person a couple times. And then later that season in 2022, I actually got to cover the WNBA's media when I was writing for Hoop Social. And
I remember that.
This is a story I haven't told many people, but when I was in there as media, as a young media member, it takes a lot of courage to ask a question in a press conference. And so I decided, you know what, I had enough courage to be able to ask a question, and specifically with Sue Bird and Brianna Stewart sitting right in front of me, I was like, you know what, I don't think I'll ever get another chance to ask Sue Bird a question in a setting like this. So let me ask her a question. And this was right after the Storm had just lost a playoff game on their home floor against the Las Vegas Aces in the semifinals. And the Storm had a chance to win it in regulation. They missed the shot, goes to overtime, and the Aces pull out the win. And Chelsea Gray, Stockton native, St. Mary's High School alumna, she went off in that game. The point guard, she absolutely had herself a game. And so after the game, I asked Sue, my question was, oh, Chelsea had this, blah, 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 all these stats. What did you think of her performance? And Sue's response to me was, she was great. That was it. And I was like, oh,
that's all I need to be said.
No, I got a 3-word answer. That's not what you're looking for when you ask questions in media. And so it was obviously
that's all that needed to be said.
Yeah, it was a bad question on my part. And, she humbled me a little bit there. But, I needed to do better, and I needed to ask a better question, because obviously Sue was upset that they just lost. And it was a game 3 too. It was a pivotal game 3 in a best-of-5 series. And the Aces went on to win that series. They went on to win the WNBA championship. And so,
it was destiny.
Yeah, but hey, at least I asked her a question, and I didn't let my fear get to me there. And so shout out to Sue Bird, all-time legend in the WNBA, well-deserved statue. And Keith, before we get out of here on episode 155, number one, I really appreciate you for joining me today. Means a lot, long time coming. We're happy to have you here. But before we get out of here, since we're talking about the WNBA and statues, and I mentioned at the top of this segment, the Sacramento Monarchs. If you had to name one Sacramento Monarch to get a statue at Golden One Center, obviously they never played there, but they're not going to put the statue on the land of Arco Arena. So if you had to name one Sacramento Monarch to get a statue outside of Golden One Center, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's tough, because there's a lot of great players that have played for the Monarchs. I would say Ruthie Bolton. It's a toss-up between her and Tisha Penicheiro, in my opinion. I think Ruthie was a big factor in that championship series against the Shock or the Minnesota Lynx. I think that she definitely deserves it, partly because of her story. But she's been great in the community. She shows up to every single basketball women's event still in Sacramento. And this is 20 years after they lost the team. So I just think that she deserves her flowers. Obviously, Tisha was great for a long time, and Tisha Penicheiro really was the favorite player of a lot of women that played women's basketball in Sacramento for years. I would pick either of those two. I would like to hopefully see one day the Monarchs come back to Sacramento. That's a little more in the distance now. That's a possibility because the Valkyrie are in Golden State, and obviously they're off to a great start, and kudos to them. I would like to see either Ruthie or Tisha Penicheiro get that statue if I had it my way.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned Tisha, because I thought of 3 names, and Ruthie is a great pull right there, because she's an Olympian, and she is just a very nice person, because you mentioned how she has made herself present at so many events going on in the Sacramento sports scene. I've met her 4 times because she's so present everywhere, and she's such a nice lady. And so I think that's a great nomination. The 3 names that came to mind for me, number 1 was Tisha Penicheiro. Then I also thought about Kara Lawson. And
oh gosh, I knew I was missing somebody.
But then I also thought about Yolanda Griffith, who into the Basketball Hall of Fame as well. And Yolanda really tore up the WNBA in those late 90s. But if I had to pick one, I would say Tisha Penicheiro, simply because before Sue Bird really put a bow on the end of her career with breaking the assist record and the fact that she had 4 championships in her career, I think that Sue Bird is the greatest point guard in WNBA history, but Tisha was the best point guard in WNBA history until Sue took that spot. And so I would say Tisha Penicheiro would be my pick to get a statue outside of Golden One Center. But
I'd like to see it.
Man, before any of those hypotheticals happen, you got to have a Kings player statue out there, and it's probably like a Chris Webber out there.
You don't want a DeMarcus Cousins statue out there?
Well,